Yeah, we're not doctors or giving any medical advice. This show is intended for educational purposes only, and you should talk to your doctor about any medical issues. Now, let's get at it.
Welcome to Chat the Fat, where nutrition authors Nissa Graun and TC Hale are going to break down common low-carb mistakes. Let's chat all things low-carb, keto, digestion, and more so you can maximize your results.
Hello, good people, and welcome back to Chat the Fat. This is episode number 6. We already got a 6 on it. I'm TC Hale, and I'm here with Nissa Graun. Nissa Graun, tell us your experience, something that you've had with lemon-flavored air freshener. Okay, you don't really have to do that, yeah.
I don't like lemon-flavored air freshener, so that's my
Nobody really does. Okay, we could talk about anything else then. So what's going on?
Nothing, just hanging out, taking a break from the kids to talk to you.
Okay, I really appreciate people taking breaks to talk to me, and then they usually end up needing a break from me.
Now I'll take the break from the kids. That helps.
Yeah, I tend to pee in the potty, so that is one bonus that I have.
Yes, that's good.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a 6th episode topic here today. We're really kind of cranking along.
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about the differences between low-carb diets and keto diets because, believe it or not, they are 2 different diets.
Yeah, people kind of clump them together a lot.
Yeah, and while keto is relatively new, especially to the mainstream world, because ketogenic diets have been around for quite a while, at least since the 1920s when they were used for treatment of epilepsy, but they're new to the mainstream. But lower carb diets, I feel like, have been around and been more popular on and off for at least a few decades. There are definitely a lot of people, like you said, that tend to group keto and low-carb diets together. But there are several differences between low-carb and ketogenic diets, and they should be used in different situations.
Yeah, so we'll break some of those down, and then we'll also talk about, which diet may be right for certain people and kind of go through that today.
Yes, and also help people determine which one they should choose, which one is right for them.
Yeah.
Before we talk about that, I feel like we should at least start with the standard American diet so people know where a lot of people are starting out and the amount of carbs that are consumed on the standard American diet. So the dietary guidelines suggest that carbs should make up anywhere between 45 to 65% of your daily total calories.
And that they should come from a vending machine.
Pretty much, yes.
Maybe it doesn't say that. I don't know.
Yeah, but they imply that. If you eat the recommended 2,000 calories per day, then that means most people are going to end up eating somewhere between 225 to 325 grams of carbs per day.
Which is really that's about what I ate this year. And you said per day.
Per day, yes.
Per day. Okay, that is different then. I thought that was an annual number, and I was like, oh, well, that's just like me.
No, and these are the carbs that you're eating. They're recommending following a healthy diet that's set by our government, and this does not include the way that most Americans eat, which is a lot of fast food or a lot of foods from the vending machines, a lot of junky processed foods that are in packages.
Right.
So that's where a lot of people are starting out, especially when they come to maybe a low-carb diet. So when we're talking about a low-carb diet, there's different definitions. Anyone you speak to is going to give you a different definition. So I thought that we can go through a few of them to see their differences.
Okay.
The first,
I bet some of these are going to be good.
Yes. Well, the first one I found is from a very mainstream source, which I know a lot of people, even in the low-carb or keto world, still abide by, and that is WebMD. And so their definition is, according to Institute of Medicine, the organization that sets the recommended daily intake of nutrients, adults and children over the age of 1 should eat 130 grams of carbs per day. And they go on to state that this is the absolute minimum amount that we need in order to live a healthy life. And that's the lowest that anyone should ever go on a low-carb diet.
Or you will die by the time you watch TV that night.
That is what they want you to believe.
Okay,
Correct.
cool. Sweet.
Yes, and so then we move on to the Diet Doctor's definition, which is a lower carb friendly website. So the Diet Doctor says that a low carb diet is low in carbohydrates, primarily found in sugary foods, pasta, and bread. Instead, you eat real foods, including protein, natural fats, and vegetables. And they go on to state that studies show that low carb diets result in weight loss and improved health markers. And these diets have been in common use for decades. And so the amount of carbs that they view as low carb falls anywhere between 50 to 100 grams of net carbs per day. And so they do specify net carbs, where they are subtracting out the fiber from foods like vegetables and not necessarily processed foods like low carb candy bars.
Right. Yeah, because you can really add a whole lot more when you start taking away sugar alcohols and things that you see in bars and that people do all the time.
Yeah. And then we have our definition that we commonly refer to in our courses or books. And that definition is anywhere between 10 to 25 grams of carbs per meal, plus a few extra snacks. So you may end up somewhere between 75 to 100 grams of carbs per day on a low carb diet like that.
Yeah, so you can see that there's different definitions for the same thing. They're they vary pretty drastically.
Yes. So I know, like, when I first started reading your book, with your version of the low carb diet, there were some questions that are pretty common. So as you can see, our version of a low carb diet is pretty similar to the Diet Doctor's version. And that makes sense because they're a low carb friendly website.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different than the WebMD, which is more mainstream. But if someone were to be very literal and they just read the interpretation of the Diet Doctor's version, and maybe they decided that, okay, they're going to do a low carb diet, they're going to eat 100 grams of carbs per day, but then they decide to eat all of those 100 carbs in one meal, and then the rest of the day only eat protein and fat. How is that different than spacing out carbs throughout the day, more like our definition?
Right. So if they were just going to have like a 6-pound cinnamon bun for breakfast, and then, but then I'm going to eat paleo and, just.
Yeah. And when I wrote that, I was a little skeptical, like, oh, no one would really ever do that. But I actually just posted a picture of a Shamrock Shake on my Instagram, and it had 75 grams of carbs in it. And
Wow.
someone said, well, that's not bad if that's all your carbs for the day. So people do that.
Right. Yeah. And they are looking at numbers because people still take that calorie in, calorie out mentality. And now they're just going to use that same math mentality. Maybe they thrived at math in school. So they're going to take that math mentality and put it into carbs. And the problem is that, let's say you're having 10 to 25 carbs per meal, and you're having those carbs with proteins and fats, and those proteins and fats are slowing how quickly those carbs and sugars are going to hit your bloodstream and create an insulin spike. And the trouble that we try to avoid is the insulin spike. It's that insulin spike that kind of tells our body that, okay, it's time to store things in fat cells for later. So when you're spacing things out, you can avoid that huge spike. And what comes with that often is a huge crash as well. It's a crash in blood sugar because the insulin goes so high that it sweeps out too much blood sugar from your bloodstream, and then you're starving or you're craving more carbs or sugars. So you really don't want to have all your carbs in one thing, especially with a Shamrock Shake, because that's a liquid form of sugars, and that's the effect of liquid sugars can be 5 times it would be on sugars or carbs from food. So, people could put a larger amount of carbs at a specific meal, maybe if they were a bodybuilder or they're working out a lot and they, or they're wanting to mess with their physiology a little bit. We talk about some advanced things in other courses and stuff where you can kind of push yourself more anabolic at night to either build muscle or, sleep. There's a lot of things you could do that were more complicated, but generally speaking, you really want to keep your blood sugar, especially when we're talking about fat loss and losing weight in that respect. You want to keep your blood sugar on an even keel. So you want to space those carbs out. So that insulin just has to come up a little bit, and then it doesn't get that crash, and you just kind of you get to be a reasonable human being all day long.
Yeah, because not only if they were to eat that way would you get that big crash, but then I'm guessing it's just going to take them a lot longer to get back into fat burning mode too, so it won't be that effective for them.
Yeah, because that's the trick, is that we eat carbs and our blood sugar raises. It goes up. And then insulin goes up to follow that. And then blood sugar can come down really quickly, like within an hour, to where it's right back where it started. But insulin takes a lot longer to come down, and it can take hours to come down after blood sugar already did. So while it's high, your body can't access stored fat for fuel. So now you don't have a fuel source to burn.
So it sounds like hopefully no one's taking that literal interpretation, but that's not a good idea. If you are following a low carb plan, to eat all your carbs at once, and it's a good idea to just space them out throughout the day to stay more even keel.
Right.
Okay, so when starting out on a low carb plan, in your book, you state that people should aim for 25 grams of carbs or less per meal. And typically when people are starting out, they're still eating the typical 3 meals per day, sometimes snacks. So later in the book, you suggest lowering 1 meal. So we're either going to lower either breakfast or dinner to only like 10 or 15 grams of carbs. Now, how might this help someone see more progress than if they were still eating 25 grams of carbs with each of those 3 meals?
Right. And it might even create better progress than, let's say, if maybe, okay, I'm going to drop my carbs to 18 per meal, but I'm going to have them at every meal. Those results might not be as good as if you just drop the carbs altogether from dinner or breakfast. Because what you're trying to do is create a longer window of time where you're not taking in carbs, so that insulin has a chance to come down and stay down for a longer period of time. Maybe it's while you're sleeping all night, but at least your body can access stored fat while insulin is low. So I like to see people first drop their carbs from either dinner or from breakfast, so that they get that longer window of no carb eating time.
And would that have as big of an effect if, say, they were to keep their carbs a little bit higher at breakfast and a little bit higher at dinner, and then they dropped them really low during lunch?
Well, it's better than nothing, but it's just not as optimal, because then you're still going to create a little bit of an insulin increase at the breakfast and then again at dinner. And it just takes a lot longer for that to come down. So why not just put it on either end of the day, so you either have all of that span of time while you slept plus breakfast, or all of that evening time plus the span of time that you're sleeping. It just creates a longer window that way.
Okay. And now, if you're not following a keto diet or even low carb, a lot of fitness gurus out there will tell you that you just need to eat all day, every 2 to 3 hours. So if you're not eating a meal, you're constantly shoving in snacks. So since most people who are following a low carb plan are still glucose burners, should they still be eating snacks following that 2 to 3 hour window?
Well, one big dependent on this kind of thing is, where's your blood pressure? Because when blood pressure is low, say the top number is under 112, that's an indication that your mineral reserves are low. You're not bringing in as many minerals because you're not digesting your food correctly, or maybe you're peeing out too many minerals. But either way, when the minerals are low, you need that blood sugar a little bit elevated to buffer the low minerals so the body can function correctly. So if you go too long without food, you're going to start craving sugar or salty kind of things. So if blood pressure is low, somebody may need to do a little more snacks or that kind of thing, where if somebody does have enough mineral in their systems and they're keeping their blood sugar on an even keel where they're not creating those spikes and crashes, they could get away with maybe not needing as many meals or snacks, and they could have an easier time of letting their body get into that fat burning mode, where now the body's using an alternative fuel source, so it doesn't need you to keep cramming in, carbs and snacks and stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And what do you think those snacks should look like? Like a stick of cheese?
I like them to be brown snacks.
Brown sounds like carbs.
Yeah, like a box of cereal. One
Yeah.
box of cereal is my snack. Um, I don't know. What do you see, like when you were doing low carb stuff, what were the snacks that worked for you as far as um, maybe not spiking insulin, but also giving you maybe a little protein and some fat that kind of helped you sustain a little longer?
I was still pretty heavily dependent on processed foods when I started low carb. So I would find like a low carb bar and, try to use
Mm.
that to get through meals. I try to find the ones with more real foods, but those aren't easy to find.
Right. And I'm fine with people doing that initially just to kind of use as training wheels, to
Yeah.
get off of the eating junk all day long. But you really want to start moving towards eating real foods. And, you know, it's not that you can't have any carbs, and especially on low carb diet, things like berries or that kind of a low glycemic fruit is fine for a snack. Maybe you put it in a little bit of yogurt. So there's, Greek yogurt that doesn't have a bunch of sugar in it. So you're getting a little bit of fat and protein that way, but there's also some carbs to help you out. And, but when somebody it has the ability to reduce their carbs further because maybe they fixed digestion. Now they can pull more minerals out of their food. So there's more mineral in the system. I like to see those snacks start to go more towards, maybe it's just another smaller meal. Maybe it's like a chicken leg and some broccoli or something like that. And that could be a snack. And maybe a person is having those if they feel like they need more snacks throughout the day, but more food throughout the day. But I don't always go along with all the fitness gurus that say eat nonstop. That's when you can actually pull resources out of the food you're eating. You don't need to eat all the time because your body's getting what it needs. When you're not creating spikes and crashes, you don't need to eat every 2 hours like they say to do.
Yeah, especially when you're lowering your carbs so much, like you're just not as hungry anymore. A lot of people assume it would be the opposite because maybe they're not eating as much food, but those carbs really create those high spikes and crashes.
Right. And it's in the crashes where a lot of trouble, not only hunger and cravings and all those things that make you need to eat more, but a lot of other problems come about too.
So if people are shifting from the standard American diet to a low carb plan, what kind of foods should they be focusing on? I mean, I know pretty much anyone you listen to will tell you that real food is best, but what does real food even mean? Because I don't think people understand that anymore.
Right. So what is the definition you understand now as far as when you look at real food? What do you think?
So one of the easiest ways is the foods that you're going to find in the perimeter of the grocery store. So the fruits and vegetables, the meats and dairy products, a lot of those, like the foods that aren't in packages, that don't have calorie counts on them, and they don't contain a bunch of ingredients that you can't even pronounce.
Right. And a lot of people like us use that as an example to help people understand. I wonder if stores are going to catch on and start switching around where they put everything just to throw people off.
Yeah, I've been hearing it for a while, so they haven't caught on yet.
Yeah.
And so, oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so now that we kind of understand what the real food is, taking that another step further, we also tell people that they want to eat low to medium glycemic index carbs. What does that mean?
Right. So you want, like a potato, a white potato, really can spike blood sugar the same way that a candy bar would. So you want to eat foods that maybe they contain some carbs if you need those carbs, but they don't spike and crash blood sugar so hard. Like things like sweet potatoes don't hit you as hard as a white potato would. Things like yams, butternut squash, berries, Brussels sprouts, things like that, where you're getting some carbs, but they help keep you on a more even keel.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are shocked when they find out that eating a piece of white bread can actually spike your insulin higher than a lot of candy bars, because at least candy bars have nuts or, some kind of fat to actually slow that insulin spike down, whereas bread is just mostly carbs.
Right. Yeah. And people get confused because they'll say, oh, I'm going to have whole grains and then it's okay. And it's, it's pretty close to the same thing.
Yeah. So when we talk about low to medium glycemic carbs, you said sweet potatoes and yams. I'm still not really sure of the difference between those.
It's just the spelling. The spelling is the only difference.
Okay. And what are some other examples? Because I know, like, when I first started learning about that, I didn't really know what to eat, what was low to medium.
Well, one of my favorites is like Brussels sprouts. That was a pretty good one. Butternut squash was a big one. And I really like to, especially if have a low blood pressure client that's really needing a little more carbs like that, I like to use berries especially around for a snack, because that gives you a little more sugar without hitting you so, up and down so big. And also you can take things like that. Like what if, like there's an orange sweet potato and white sweet potato has a totally different flavor. You can cut those things up into like fries and then cook them in coconut oil. And all of a sudden that has like a very different eating experience. So you don't have to do the same thing all the time. You can do it in different ways.
Yes, and I would like to point out here, because we are talking about transitioning to real food that is low to medium glycemic. When I was in the habit of eating a lot of processed foods, I actually didn't like foods like berries at all. They were just too bitter to me, and I didn't really want to eat them. But once I dropped most of the artificial sweeteners or other processed foods from my diet, I actually love berries now. So if you just keep making that transition slowly, eventually, if you don't like something like berries or other low glycemic foods, it can happen, but a lot of times you have to get rid of most of your processed foods first.
Yeah. And the first time I craved Brussels sprouts, I was like, what is happening? This is insane. But, especially when you can improve your digestion to the point where you can actually break food down to the point where you can pull the nutrients out of that food, then your body will start to say, hey, those nutrients were awesome. Give me more of that. I want that. So that can create a lot of changes over time too.
Yeah, that has happened. That has not happened for me with Brussels sprouts yet, though.
Stick around.
My husband and my mom eat them every week, and I just can't get on board. I'm trying.
Yeah.
So a lot of people that are transitioning from the standard American diet to a low carb plan, do you think that they should just, go from eating all processed food one day and then move on to all real food the next day, because that's where they'll find the best results?
There are personalities where that might work out. But I like to see people transition a little bit so that they don't have to feel like I have to do everything 100% right or I failed. And now that I failed, I might as well quit and go have a box of ding dongs or something. I like to see people give themselves a little wiggle room. And if you can start including more real food, then at least you're transitioning in the right direction. Isn't that how you kind of did it?
Yeah, that's definitely, because I've tried that all or nothing approach where you just drop everything and try to do all the vegetables and all the real food, and that never worked for me. It didn't work for me until I just slowly transitioned over time.
Right. Because what happens is you start finding real food and real food recipes that you really like. And then your taste buds start to change, and then you start to like them more. And then you add another one, and you just start adding to your arsenal of things that you can use instead of the convenience junk you were doing before.
Yeah. And I mean, if you ever do try to go back to the convenience junk after you're used to real food, it tastes like cardboard.
Right. Or like, oh my gosh, that's so sweet. I can't even have it in my mouth. What is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like over palatable.
It does not taste good. So if everyone out there is touting real food for long-term success on a low-carb diet, then why are there people out there who follow plans like Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig, where it's a lot of processed packaged foods? Why are these people still seeing success?
Well, because Oprah said to.
Yes.
And so whatever Oprah says is going to be fine.
She says to eat bread, so we should all eat bread.
I love bread.
Yes.
The first thing to understand, because you don't want to see people getting confused because somebody did something, they dropped 30 pounds, but then when they tried it, they gained 40 pounds, So you have to understand that there are a lot of different mechanisms that can create weight gain. And by using some of this, junk, a person might be at least improving another mechanism that may be causing weight gain for them. So then when you do it, it's not going to work. So, the first thing is that, man, some people don't even have a clue what they're eating. Like they're eating so much garbage, they don't even understand that I had 9 Mr. Pibbs today. I didn't even know that I could have 9 Mr. Pibbs. But when you really start to look at what's going on, you see that, wow, there's a lot of junk. So when you go to Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig or something that's structured like that, just the fact that you have to pay attention to what you're doing, a lot of people will cut the amount of junk, carbs, sugars, all this garbage in half just by paying attention. So that can be one mechanism, and there can be a lot of other things going on. But the main thing to take away is to understand that there's more than one mechanism for weight gain. It's not just the amount of food that you eat or the amount of calories or even the amount of carbs or sugars. That's not all there is to it. There's a lot of other things. If you go to kickitnaturally.com and put in the search box plateaus, and for some reason I can never spell plateaus right the first time. That's just one of those words it's never going to happen. But when you do that, you'll find an episode that we did on weight loss plateaus. And we talk about like 10 different reasons why a person can get stuck and steps they can take to fix that underlying cause. So when you understand that there's more than one cause, you can see that, okay, I can see how something could work for one person and not another.
Yeah, and I would like to point out that I have done both Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig several times in the past, and I did see success with them, but I was always miserable. I was always starving and angry.
Right. So sometimes you're working against your body, and there's a lot of things you can do while working against your body if you can use willpower. But the reality is that willpower cannot overcome physiological issues that are going wrong in the body, and they will eventually lose. So we like to see people work with their body, and then you don't have to use willpower. You just get to feel like a human.
Feel good. And also see results.
Right.
So that is a lot of information about a low-carb diet, but we also wanted to talk about a ketogenic diet and show you the differences.
We should mention that since this show is kind of about that.
Yeah, we probably want to see both sides. Let's go back to our trusty friend WebMD for their definition.
Woohoo!
And they have ketogenic is a term for a low-carb diet like the Atkins diet. The idea is you get more calories from protein and fat and less from carbohydrates. You cut back most on the carbs that are easy to digest, like sugar, soda, pastries, and white bread. And they also say when you eat less than 50 grams of carbs a day, your body eventually runs out of fuel, blood sugar, it can use quickly. This typically takes 3 to 4 days. Then you'll start to break down protein and fat for energy, which can make you lose weight. This is called ketosis.
So they maybe missed some of the points there a little bit, but that's okay. They tried hard. I think that's fine.
Yeah, they made it sound really easy.
Right, yeah. In 3 or 4 days, you should be 30 pounds down.
Why are we doing a podcast if it's that easy?
Right. Oh, boy.
Yeah, so don't listen to WebMD for a lot of things, but especially when it comes to ketosis.
WebMD, also known as, oh man, I'm going to die by Thursday.
Yeah. Especially if you haven't fixed up your anxiety yet.
Right.
So then we have the Diet Doctor's definition, which is our low-carb friendly website. And so Diet Doctor says ketogenic is low carb or less than 20 grams of carbs per day, and protein intake is moderate. So that is definitely getting closer to our definition, which
what
is
do we have?
We have keto dieters will need to keep carbs somewhere between 20 to 50 grams per day, depending on their level of insulin resistance and activity level. They will also need to keep protein moderate and fat high enough to enter into ketosis.
Cool. So again, it's weird that everybody doesn't have the same definition for everything. That's so strange.
We are closer to the Diet Doctor's definition, but they don't add in anywhere that you need enough fat in order to get into ketosis, which I think is a pretty common mistake.
Right. And I think that that's a common mistake because it's also very common for people to go into ketosis without adding a lot of fat, just because of the way that their physiology is set up, or maybe they have more fat available to them, and their body's already good at accessing stored fat for fuel. So when you see a lot of people getting into ketosis without doing that, they just assume that that's how it goes.
Yeah, and they also say that ketosis is 20 grams of carbs or less, which I know a lot of people feel like that's the threshold, but I've seen a lot of people succeed with anywhere between 20 to 50 grams of carbs, and they still I get into ketosis that high, but I've seen other people as well.
Right. So let's kind of dig a little bit into some of the differences between low carb and keto.
So I think the biggest obvious difference here is the amount of carbs that you should be eating, no matter which definition you're listening to. So with most low carb plans, you can eat upwards of 100 or even more carbs per day, whereas keto, a lot of people are going to limit you to between 20 to 50 grams per day.
Right. I can't remember if we have this somewhere in here, but just in case, while I'm thinking about this, I at least want to mention that, while we're talking about the differences between these two diets, I want to say that we find it to be very helpful for a lot of people, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people, especially those with low blood pressure, that to transition into keto, to do that through low carb, to go from the standard American diet to go low carb first and kind of transition into keto. But we really don't like to see people do both at the same time. I'm going to do low carb and keto at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually what we were just about to talk about. So you should, you're right on it.
Okay, good. Yeah, because you don't want to put yourself in that position where you're still eating maybe the amount of carbs that your body needs at this point to function correctly, because your mineral levels are too low. So maybe you're eating enough carbs, but it's too many carbs for your body to get into a really good fat burning state. But you're also going to eat all of this fat like you would on a ketogenic diet. So that's going to cause your body to say, oh, wow, we're still burning plenty of sugar. I'm using this for fuel just fine. I'm functioning. But look at all this fat coming in. I'm going to store this for later for a rainy day. And now I'm 10 pounds heavier.
Yeah, so definitely with low carb, you do want to still eat healthy fats. It's still important. But if you're eating it to the level of a ketogenic plan and you're still low carb, you're just going to gain weight, which I don't think is the intent of a lot of people.
Right. I like to see people do good fats with every meal, because that kind of tells your body, look, because your body needs fats to survive and to function and for your brain to exist, all kinds of things like this. So when you're eating at least some good fats with each meal, you're telling the body, look, plenty of fat is coming in. You don't feel like you have to hold on to all that stored fat. You can burn it for fuel and get rid of it. So the fats are important, but I see so many people that think, oh, keto just is cool because that chick over there lost 85 pounds last week. And so I'm going to eat a bunch of fat like she is. And then they gain weight almost always. So low carb is great as a transition. And if keto is right for you, that's fantastic. You just don't want to do both at the same time.
Exactly. And so another difference that we have between the two plans is with low carb, a lot of times you're no longer basing your meals on carbs because you're low carb. So you will want to start your meal planning with protein as the base of your meal. While you may still do the same thing with a keto meal, but you are going to actually limit the amount of protein that you're eating on keto as opposed to low carb, where you can probably get away with eating a little bit more protein.
Right. Because with low carb, I never have anybody really restrict their protein that much because they usually do fine with that. But when you're changing how your body's functioning, and some people will do well on keto eating much more protein. That's just kind of how it is. It's not like nobody on keto can eat a lot of protein. A lot of people do great eating a lot of protein. But especially when you're first getting into what's going to work for you, most people really need to keep their protein moderate so that they're not supplying the body with this source that it can easily turn into glucose if it feels like it needs to. So you still might, like when I'm thinking about a meal, I still base it around protein as like, okay, my meal is going to be this, but then my my meal ends up being a lot more fat than protein.
Yeah, I think when I was still doing low carb, I probably focused more on like 5 to 6 ounces of chicken with the meal. And I just, put a little bit of fat on it and I still had some carbs in there. Whereas now with a keto meal, I probably cut that in half to only 3 to 4 ounces because while calorically it's not a whole lot different, the protein definitely adds up pretty quickly, especially if you're eating something like chicken breasts.
Right. And another thing I like to kind of keep in my head is that the situation of cramming your stomach full of stuff, no matter what it is, so you eat to the point where you're stuffed, can have a similar effect as eating a lot of carbs on the body. It's so stuffed that the body feels like there's an urgency to process that, and they'll ramp up insulin just to kind of help that along. So I like to try not to stuff myself. And because I want to get enough fat in every meal, I try to limit the size of the protein just so that I have room to have some more fats, or maybe add a fat bomb to that meal kind of thing. Just something where I can boost the fats, and I tend to do a little better that way.
Yeah. And I mean, we kind of just talked about it, but a lot of people still get confused about how to structure a meal on each plan. So what would your low carb meal look like if you were helping someone else structure that?
A low carb meal would look like a decent amount of protein, whether that was, like a couple of chicken legs, 2 or 3 chicken legs, depending on the size of the person. We talk a lot about the size. The protein would be the size of the palm of your hand, kind of thing. Whether it was a steak that was that size, and then try to make vegetables the size of your whole hand. That's an easy way to look at things without having to try to measure things out and stuff like that. Just to kind of gauge from afar for a low carb type of situation. Maybe for some people, when they need a little more carbs, I might do like half a sweet potato with a little bit of broccoli and that same type of protein size. When they're doing starches like that, I like the starches to be, maybe half of what the green vegetables might be, just so they're getting some, but not such a huge serving of it. So now when we're looking at a keto serving, what do you look for there?
So basically, I didn't change too much when I started eating keto. I just ate a lot more fat bombs during my day. And then I would still start with protein, like you said, but just take away maybe a few ounces of the protein. So I wasn't getting as much of that. So a few ounces of steak less. And then obviously the carbs are a big one. So with vegetables, when you're low carb, you could be a little more general, throw more vegetables on your plate. But in keto, that actually might have a bigger effect on people if they're going over their carbs too much. So you just might want to, rein in the vegetables a little bit for some people. Some people can eat as many vegetables as they want and stay in ketosis. So it really, I think, is dependent on the person. But I think the biggest thing here is just making sure you're adding enough fat to keep you satiated, since you won't be having snacks with carbs in between meals and you're not adding those carbs to your meals.
Right. And that's kind of what I like, because I was using fat bombs before they were fat bombs. I called them coconut yummies because I made them out of coconut oil. And I liked people to include a coconut yummy with every meal, unless the meal already had a lot of fat in it. So if you had a ribeye steak, you don't really need a coconut yummy or a fat bomb or something like that with that meal when you're low carb, because you just want to get some fats, but not so many. But then when you go to keto, I'm fine having a ribeye and some butter and then following it up with a fat bomb if that all kind of fits into the meal appropriately and you're not stuffing yourself.
Yeah, and I'm also a bit of a grazer. I don't really like a structured breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, there's some meals, not that I would eat fat bombs as meals, but I might load up on those a little more heavily and eat a lot less protein for that meal.
Right.
All right. So a lot of people, we're talking about the differences between low carb and keto. And a lot of people say, low carb, you'll get results, but with keto, you're going to supercharge your results. So, and a lot of people want those bigger, better results right away. Do you think that someone following a keto plan will always see quicker results than somebody following a low carb plan?
Let's say yes for a minute with the understanding that sometimes those quicker results will be weight gain if they did it wrong.
Nice.
So uh, I, in my experience, I have found that there's no way to lose a large amount of fat as fast as you can on keto if you're doing it the correct way. But if your chemistry is not set up for that immediately, and there's a lot of things you need to fix before you're going to thrive on keto, then you might see faster results just doing low carb. You also might feel a whole lot better by doing low carb. But if you can do the right steps to really dial in your keto, that's when I say, yeah, for most people, the results will come faster. But it's also important to look at that doesn't mean that your results are going to come as fast as Hank's results did. You know what I mean? Like they look at somebody who loses 80 pounds on keto and they say, okay, that's what happens to me if I do keto. And that's not always the case at all now, is it?
No, it's not.
Yeah. So how would you define the answer to that question that you just had?
Um, I think the biggest problem with people going from low carb to keto, trying to get the bigger, better results, is not being able to stick with keto. So maybe they do great during the week and then on the weekends they fall off. And, I think those people are definitely better off sticking with low carb until maybe they can stick with keto. Because if you're on a keto diet and you keep cheating over and over again, you're likely will result in weight gain, which
Right.
isn't what we want.
Right. Yeah. If you're all about the party, then low carb is a better thing because those episodes of going off the rocker are not going to affect you as significantly as they would while doing keto.
Yeah, so you might not see the big results that you'll see with keto, but there'll be more steady results that will add up over time instead of, rushing to get to your destination, but you're not going to get anywhere if you just keep cheating.
Right. And most people are in a hurry. They want to see results fast, but keep in mind that, you probably don't have a photo shoot for a magazine cover next week. It's not that urgent of a thing. You're not on a game show where you're going to win $500,000 by losing the most amount of weight. Just have a life and be a human being in that life and allow yourself to get there gradually. The the stress alone, removing that stress from your life of I have to have this happen right now is enough to make it happen faster.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people want to get to that end result because they're in a hurry to add back in their favorite junk foods, which that's not going to work very well either.
Right. Yeah. So simmer down is the theme that we're talking about right now.
Exactly. So now that we talked about everyone getting these bigger and better results on keto, we teased them with that. We should also talk about who should stick with a low carb plan versus who is ready to move on to a keto plan.
Are the listeners nervous? Is it me? Do I get to go? Do I get to move on, or do I have to go to the principal's office?
I think so. I think a lot of them are ready to get their big and best results. I know that you love to talk body chemistry. So let's talk about which imbalances should remain low carb until the imbalances are improved.
Okay, and if you've never read any of our books or taken any courses, know what we're talking about. When we talk about these imbalances, you can learn how to look at your own physiology running simple tests that you can just do at home with tools you can pick up at like a pharmacy or health food store kind of thing. And we have an almost free digestion course. You have to pay 50 cents to register for it, but it just keeps spam registrations out. But if you need to understand what we're talking about better, you can go to kickitnaturally.com and sign up for the almost free digestion course for 50 cents. And it kind of walks you through how to look at your physiology and understand if you're dealing with these imbalances at all. So let's talk about the big one that you experience the most, and that's the low blood pressure and why that might be a problem for keto.
Yeah, and I did experience low blood pressure and all of the bad side effects that come with it. And with keto, that might be a problem because carbs raise your blood pressure. It keeps it higher. And so if you're dropping all your carbs to only 20 or less per day, then likely your blood pressure is going to drop even further, which can be disastrous for a lot of
Right.
people.
It causes a lot of problems. You can get, depression, crazy cravings. All of a sudden you're bipolar or you can't sleep. And there's a lot of issues that it can create. But keto can be tricky because not only do the carbs thicken your blood and count for part of that blood pressure, but when you really lower your carbs to a keto level, now insulin is going to come way down and your body can start to pee out even more minerals. So your blood pressure could go down even lower then, which could really be problematic. So we like to see people at least start the work to raise your mineral levels, whether you're fixing digestion so you can pull more minerals out of your food, or you're using sea salt or some supplements that you can use to raise your mineral levels. We find that if people will do that first while doing low carb, that they have much more success transitioning to keto, and they stay married.
Yes, they feel good.
Yeah. So their spouse does not kick them out of the house, kind of thing. So it can be big. So the next imbalance is a catabolic imbalance. And if a person is already severely in this state, it can cause a lot of problems like tissue breakdown and insomnia and some other issues. But carbs can be pro-anabolic, which is the opposite of this. It can help a person pull out of this catabolic imbalance. So if you remove all your carbs, it has the ability to possibly push some people even more catabolic, which could really exacerbate some issues that they're currently dealing with. So we like to see people work on that imbalance. And the third one is if someone has a really low breath rate, basically that's saying that the blood is a little bit too alkaline. And when that's the case, it can create some oxygen utilization issues. And this is why some people will go start keto and they just have no energy. Not only is their body not processing the fuel they're eating correctly, but they also can't use oxygen correctly, and they're zapped, and they're sitting on the couch cussing anyone who ever mentioned that they should do keto.
Yes, and I've seen a lot of message boards where people ask why they have zero energy on keto, and everyone just always blames the keto flu. I don't think I've ever seen low breath rate as an answer even one time.
Right, but just understand that when you hear this, oh, I'm having keto flu, that's all it is. But keto flu is not an actual thing. It's just, it's the way you feel because of underlying causes creating that feeling that everybody groups into what they call keto flu. So when you're feeling those flu type issues, know that and we did an episode where we talked about that a lot already, right? I don't remember what episode it was, but
yeah, I want to say it was episode 4.
it was when we were talking about transitioning to keto, I think, and people can have keto flu stuff. If you Google, if you put it in the search box at chatthefat.com, keto flu, then you'll find the episodes where we talked about that to better understand that. But these are some of the big imbalances that we see, that if someone is already leaning this way as it is, then if they do keto, it can make it a lot worse.
And so we hit the chemistry component. Let's talk about your other favorite topic, when to know if you should stay with low carb or move on to keto, and that is talking about digestive malfunctions. How can you determine if you're ready to move on to a keto plan, or should you stay low carb if you're having digestive issues?
Well, one thing to really understand is that to succeed on any type of diet, no matter what diet it is, your body needs to be able to process the foods that you're eating. And if you can't, then the foods that you're eating are causing more trouble than they are good. So whether you're doing, even if you're doing some stupid, ignorant, completely dumb, low-fat diet that a lot of people like to do, if you're doing that, then if you're not be able to have the ability to process the carbs and the proteins that you're eating, because when you lower one food, you got to increase other ones. A keto diet lowers carbs, but you're increasing fat, so you need to be able to process the foods that you're eating. So if a person doesn't have their bile flowing correctly, which we teach about in the free digestion course, then you can't emulsify fats correctly. So now you're going to jack up the level of fats that you're consuming to like 5 times what you were doing before. Well, that's 5 times the amount of what your body didn't know what to do with before. And now you're going to multiply it times 5. How's that going to go?
Not very well. And it could result in symptoms like diarrhea, loose stool, gas, acne, itchy skin, nausea, all of those things where you're not going to feel well.
And it's funny, like all those things, all these issues that you hear about, and you hear people will just put keto in front of it. And now all of a sudden, it's be like, oh, you have keto diarrhea, you have keto crotch, or whatever the people were saying. And these are just issues that can come about from an inability to process foods correctly. So your body is doing things to stop you from doing that. It's making you want to throw up. It's pushing undigested fats out through your skin so you have this huge rash. It's doing all these things. But the reality is you just need to help your body be able to process the foods that you're eating on that diet.
Well, obviously, it's important to be able to process fat, since keto is sometimes like 75 to 85% of what you eat is going to be fat. But what about for those who aren't digesting protein well, which is what we talked about in our last episode? It seems like since keto is more of a moderate protein diet, if people aren't digesting protein well, that maybe keto would be good for them.
Right, but if somebody was eating lean cuisines, they're not getting a lot of real protein. So when you go to real food and you have real protein, you have a steak, your body needs resources to be able to break that down. And if it's not doing that correctly, that's a problem. So go listen to chatthefat.com/episode 5. And that was about protein a lot. We talked about that a lot.
Yeah. And then in any group of dieters, you're always going to get those people who are in a rush to get the biggest results they can, the quickest they can. Now, if these people want to jump from low carb into keto right away and just live with the side effects we just talked about, will they see progress? I mean, can they just live with diarrhea and still lose weight?
There's a little, okay, let's look at this, okay, because you're going to see people who do. You're going to see people who push through and I don't care, and then they see great results and they forget that they wanted to murder people for 5 days straight. They forget all about that because now they're getting the result. But if your bile is not flowing correctly, consuming more fats has the ability to more frequently trigger the gallbladder to release bile, which can kind of stimulate action. And for some people who may just need a little boost, it can help the bile start to flow. And then all of a sudden they start doing great on keto. But for most people with bile flow issues, they need help fixing that. And just eating more fats is not going to do that. And those people are going to be miserable. So most people are not going to be able to just push through and succeed. They're going to end up telling everybody how stupid keto was and how they almost died because they ate 7 slices of bacon. So don't be that guy. You want to not only succeed on what you're trying to do, but you want it not to be the worst misery that you've ever gone through. Why not just work with your body, help your body function a little better, and then if it can process the fats better, the keto's not only going to see success and results faster, but it's going to be a much easier transition.
Yeah. And we talked about the chemistry, the digestion, something we did talk about earlier, but I think it's really important to note this again, is others who may want to stay on a low carb plan longer term include those people who are trying out the keto plan, but they still end up cheating every weekend or every few days, sometimes even every few weeks. And I think these people really need to take a step back and work on improving their digestion and also their mindset prior to moving on to keto, because if they're cheating every few weeks, it can still lead to weight gain, since too much fat combined with too many carbs will lead to weight gain.
Right. And people are sad sometimes when they find out that science cannot be convinced to not be science.
Exactly. Now, what about people who swear, and I've heard people swear by this, that they stay ketogenic low carb level, like keto low carb levels throughout the week, and they still eat their higher carbs over the weekend. So do there some total, like, can you total up over the week and have that count? So where you're eating keto during the week and then cheating on the weekends, will you still see consistent results that way?
Well, how long do you see that it takes most people to even get into a good solid state of ketosis?
If everything is perfect and they're lucky, it can take a minimum of a week for a lot of people, especially at the beginning.
Right. And much more commonly, even longer than that, 10 days to 2 weeks kind of thing. So if you're carving it up every weekend, how do you ever get there?
Yeah, that's what a lot of people like. People just view the weekends as free-for-alls, and that's not the case with keto. It really can never be the case. Maybe like when you've been doing it a long time.
Right. When you're fat adapted and your body is really good at processing fats, then you can have carbs from time to time and it could knock you out of ketosis. And like even Nissa can eat usually more carbs than I would be able to eat and stay in ketosis. But a lot of people can eat even more. But once you're in that state, you can eat more carbs and it might knock you out, but a lot of people will get right back in to where it's not such a big deal. But if you're a person who's trying to become fat adapted and you're eating a bowl of Cheerios every weekend, it's probably not going to work out.
Yeah, cheat with a better food than Cheerios because they're not that good.
Which the cereal aisle used to be my favorite place when I was a carb person.
Yeah, but Cocoa Pebbles are way better than Cheerios.
Right.
Cheerios are boring. All right. So now that we've talked people off the ledge and not trying to rush through low carb if they're not ready, what about the people that just want to stay low carb? Do you think there's any health benefits that they might get by eventually following a keto plan that they won't get following a low carb plan?
One of them is a health benefit. I call a health benefit by lowering your expenses.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you can keto it up real nice, your grocery bill really goes down. Now you can spend some money getting set up, buying things that might help you. But man, when you're really ketoing, your grocery bill goes down.
All that, the less protein that you're eating, I think makes a big deal.
Right. And, more than half of the health issues that people deal with today are due to inflammation that's caused by high insulin levels and all the problems that excess carbs can cause. And I'm not saying that problems that carbs cause, but excess carbs, and most people consume excess carbs. And so when you can remove that burden that you're causing the body, there's a really large number of health issues that you can improve by doing this.
Yeah, I feel like all the health issues I had when I started, a lot of them were improved just by following a low carb plan. And so I'm really glad that I started there. But, if I were starting brand new today and I'm listening to a lot of keto experts that are out there, they tell you that you need to do keto or you're not going to improve these health problems. And in my experience, that just wasn't true.
Right.
I did feel extra energy when I was in ketosis, but that might be the only thing for me.
You mean as far as the extra benefit of health-wise?
Yeah, being in ketosis, I just felt like extra bursts of energy without having to eat.
Well, the real benefit is that between going low carb and keto, if your problem is really caused by insulin spikes and too much carbs, let's say you're type 2 diabetic or something, where the problem is really, you're going to have a hard time fixing that problem if you're still consuming a lot of carbs. So then it becomes a situation of your ability to not consume those carbs. And it's a lot easier to not consume carbs on keto than it is on low carb. On low carb, you're still giving yourself enough of this crack to make you say, hey, I really wouldn't mind some more crack right now.
Yeah.
But when you go keto and you're in ketosis and your body can access stored fat and you have this other fuel source and you have ketones your body can use, then you don't need those carbs. Skipping the Pop-Tarts is pretty easy. I wonder when the last time I had a Pop-Tart.
I haven't had one in a while either, thankfully. So what about the mainstream sources like WebMD probably says when we talked about earlier that those who are type 2 diabetic should avoid a ketogenic diet. Are they correct in stating this?
Right. And a lot of this just goes back to the situation where the mainstream has done this thing where a person has a heart attack, so they crack them open and they look in there and they see all these saturated fats. So like, look at what the saturated fats did to this person. But what they're not viewing is that these saturated fats are a saturated fat called palmitic acid, which is a saturated fat that the body makes when there are excess carbohydrates consumed. So they view a problem that's being caused by excess carbohydrates and they're blaming it on saturated fats. So then they kind of blame a lot of these problems. They say that type 2 diabetic is from too much fats because the fats clog up the cells where they can't be receptive to the insulin. And it's just all this ignorance that it's hard to get around. But when you see when you just look at the number of health issues that people are improving on low fat and ketogenic diets, both of which where they're increasing their saturated fat intake, you see that you just kind of have to look at what's going on. And when you understand the real science, it's easy to see why.
Yeah, when I had gestational diabetes, they recommended less carbs. So they weren't saying eat all the carbs, but it was definitely still way more carbs than are allowed on even our definition of a low carb diet. And the nutritionist I was seeing was recommending that I stick with foods that were labeled sugar-free, so like diet foods that are processed and have a lot of chemicals in them.
Right.
Of course, they recommended the healthy whole grains and fruit for gestational diabetes, as they do with type 2 diabetics as well. And then again, like she was recommending low-fat foods that again, we're filled with chemicals and artificial sweeteners and probably not the best thing to consume when you're growing a baby.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Toxinating up the baby.
Yeah. So we're not doctors, but sometimes you need to put in your own research to.
Right. Yeah. You have to figure out some things and make your own decisions a little bit. That's kind of
Yeah.
what I decided to do after 23 doctors couldn't help me.
Yes. So speaking of that, are there any health conditions that people might have where they should avoid a ketogenic diet?
When I think about this, I look at things where like the imbalances we talked about, the catabolic, low blood pressure, overly alkaline bloodstream, those all can create health issues. So if you're dealing with a health issue that is common with one of those imbalances, then a ketogenic diet could make that worse. But, my brain always goes to, especially the things that are caused by low blood pressure, like, depression is a big one. Anxiety, that's another really big one. But the biggest one that's caused by low blood pressure really is seizures. And my view on seizures is that they occur when the minerals are already low and then blood sugar goes very low as well. So both are low and there's nothing to buffer the system and allow it to function correctly. And so the system just kind of shuts down and says, we can't function. We don't have anything to function on. But what's the way that people have been fixing epilepsy for decades? It's the ketogenic diet. So, what I feel is happening is that they're removing the sugar crash. It's the crash is where real trouble comes in. And when you remove the carbs, you're no longer getting the spike that creates that crash, and the bloodstream can stay on a more even keel, and you don't get the seizures anymore. So I still would recommend people who are dealing with low blood pressure to work on that before you really start cranking this up. But people for decades have been using this to help people just because they're removing that burden of the spike and the crash in blood sugar.
Okay. And now another question that a lot of people have is, and even though we say don't worry about the calories, everyone worries about the calories. So how do calories factor into both low carb and keto plans? Should you be counting calories on either plan?
Well, I've said this on other interviews, that it's not like calories don't exist or that they don't matter at all. I just hate people to count calories because you're going to screw yourself over. You're counting something that is not the deciding factor in whatever you're trying to do. But one benefit that can come from counting calories is that now you're paying attention to what you're eating. At least you don't, by the time you got to the seventh Mr. Pibb, you'd be like, oh, maybe this is a little much, because you're actually doing math with that Mr. Pibb. But, you know, when I have people do low carb, I try to tell them, don't count calories. I don't want you to count them at all, because I don't want you to be misled by what you're doing. I want you to listen to your body a little bit more. When it comes to keto, again, I don't like the calories, but I don't mind people tracking their macros, especially in the beginning until you get a gist of that, because then you can really get an idea of the percentage of fat you're eating compared to the percentage of other things. But what is your view? Because you had calorie counting ingrained in your head. I don't know if it still automatically happens in your brain every day as you eat whatever you're eating. Like if you automatically just look at a plate and you're like, oh, that's about 420. You know, what's your view on that?
I can look at a plate and tell you how many calories are in it, but I don't count them, which is a blessing because for so long I did. So when I was doing low carb, it was still entrenched in my head that I needed to count calories. So I still did. And I didn't count them exactly or obsessively, but I was still in a certain range. And I did find success that way. If I were to go back and do it over again, I would definitely focus way less on the calories. But I feel like with keto, a lot of experts tell you that you still need to eat low calorie, and I just view that as wrong. I've helped so many people that were told to eat low calorie keto that just stalled out and didn't get any results. And then once they stop paying attention to that and they start eating more fat, that's when they started seeing results. So I definitely don't think you should count calories while you're on keto. A lot of times the only people I advise to count calories are the people that probably aren't eating enough.
Yeah, and I think the only reason that you view, low calorie keto as wrong is because, low calorie keto is wrong.
I don't know. There's a lot of people out there that beg to differ, but I don't agree with those people.
Right. That's fine. It's just, if you're switching everything over to you're eating a lot more fats and, you're reducing the carbs, then there's going to be calories in those. So that's going to cause a lot of confusion if you're trying to do that. And not that somebody couldn't make it happen. And certainly, if another mechanism is causing weight gain, that's not going to be a problem for them. But trying to do that is going to confuse a lot of people, and they're going to fail.
Yeah, it just adds too much that they don't really need to pay attention to, and then they just give up entirely.
Right. And counting calories is also going to restrict them from having a fat bomb with a meal where they really needed a fat bomb.
Yeah. What is your view on exercise with low carb and keto? Is there something that you should do differently with either plan?
I think that you may find that. I find that I work out less just because I can if I'm keto while I'm doing keto stuff, because there's times where I'll cycle out of it for a while. But when I'm keto, I can work out much less and just stay looking the same. There are some people who may need some more protein when they're working out very intensely, if they're really trying to focus on building muscle and if they want to look like an action figure, that's a kind of a different conversation. But when you're just talking about human cardio on keto, I like to see be easy cardio. I feel that the people will see better results doing easy cardio than if they were running. You understand what I'm saying? Like just walking is going to create more fat burning than going for a jog or sprint or some spin class or something like that.
And is that because the harder exercise, is that like burn up more glucose? Is that why?
Well, you're also causing a bigger stress on your body, which can create more stress hormones, and the stress hormones kind of signal your body that we're running from a lion, so I'm going to break down this tissue and turn it into glucose so I have immediate fuel.
Okay.
So not only does that take your body's focus away from burning fat, but it could be enough to pull you out of ketosis for some people. And then, for the few hours after the workout, you're still not really burning fat. So those types of exercise have benefits, and they they can certainly be utilized for benefits. But when it just comes to losing weight and burning fat while on keto, I prefer to see any cardio workouts as easier workouts. I think you get more out of it.
Yeah, I lost a lot of weight just walking, which was a big change for me because I used to be way over exercise, but just the walking was really all I needed.
Right.
All right, well, that is basically what we have to say about the differences between low carb and keto. I actually had a whole lot more to say, so I actually did a special bonus episode talking about my first year in the low carb world.
Okay. Yeah, great. So it'll be out later this week too.
All right.
Yeah, 6.5 is what we'll call it.
Yes, 6.5. We do have a listener question, and this is from Shannon in Indiana. And she said, what is best for beginners versus people who have already done keto? I feel like I'm eating a lot of fat, but then I see people who eat way more fat than I do. Are they able to do that since they have less fat on their bodies? This part is continually confusing to me.
I certainly think that can be a factor. I just don't like it when people say it's a rule. Like when people say, if you have a lot of body fat, don't eat fat because your body will just burn that fat. I'm not
I
in
hate
that camp. But I think that's the camp that makes you violent, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Why does that make you so violent?
Because that's the low calorie keto. They just want you to keep lowering your calories, and so many people get stalled that way, especially women.
Right. So but I do think that as long as you're just stoking that fire with fat, and telling your body that, look, plenty of fat's coming in, you can burn fat, that maybe a person with more stored body fat might be able to, burn more of that fat, to lose fat faster. I think that makes a lot of sense. But still, the person is bringing in fat, into the body. They're consuming it. They're not leaving that altogether. So I don't know that I really understand her question. Is she asking, how come my neighbor is eating more fat than I am? Or what is she really saying?
Yeah, I think she's saying like the longer you're on keto or the less body fat you have, should you eat more fat? And I don't think it's necessarily, being on keto longer means you can eat more fat, or having less body fat means you can eat more fat. It really depends more on like your diet history. Have you gone through a life of deprivation where you weren't giving your body the nutrients it needs? And I think for those people, they need more fat so their body realizes it's okay to burn the fat that they have on their bodies.
Right. And I also like to say, listen to your body a little bit. If you're hungry an hour and a half after you had a full keto meal, you probably didn't get enough fat, or you're not digesting your food correctly. Something is missing there. Maybe you're not eating the right kind of protein, or something's going on where you might want to test out increasing your fat in a meal and see if that leaves you satiated longer.
Yeah, I think it can depend a lot on insulin resistance too, because like my husband, for instance, was eating a lot of fat and he was not getting into ketosis on the blood monitor no matter what he did. And he actually had to double his fat. So going from somewhere like 120 or 150 grams to 280 grams of fat before he even reached ketosis.
And during the time that he wasn't in ketosis, he also was not losing weight, right?
Yeah, he wasn't seeing
Right.
consistent
Okay.
results at all.
Yeah, because I'm fine if somebody doesn't show a lot of ketones on the blood meter if they're still losing weight, because, I think a person does need to use the blood meter to really get an idea of what's going on, but that doesn't mean that it's always going to be accurate, depending on your body's ability to utilize ketones more. That number may go down a little bit, even though you're still doing just as well. So don't let that freak you out so much.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But like for him, he was doing what everyone says you need to do to get into ketosis and eating under 20 grams of carbs per day. But that there was more to the story for him before he could see, not only get into ketosis, but actually see results on the scale each week.
Right. So his percentage of fat needed to go up a lot to do that.
Yes.
So that's something that a person can test out. They can test out doing a high percentage of fat with each meal and see how that works for them. If you gain weight doing that, that you're eating fat at a higher pace than your body can process or utilize correctly. So it's a listening to your body kind of thing.
That is right. Okay, so we also, for this episode, have a checklist of how you should know with whether or not you should stick with low carb versus when you are ready to transition to keto. So you can get that at chatthefat.com/episode 6.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that'll be a free download there that'll be right there with all the show notes and any links we add there.
Yeah, we definitely talked about a lot. So go get that checklist to help you out to know if you are ready to transition from low carb to keto. We also have a keto product that we were going to review this week, and that is these epic uncured bacon bits that I got off of Thrive Market. Have you tried these yet?
I haven't tried those. I had Bake-O bits before,
Bake-O bits,
but I think I was
yeah.
9. I think I was 9 when I tried those.
I don't think they're the same as us. So I was on Thrive Market, and they actually have a whole section devoted to keto. So I saw these, and I thought I would give them a try. Let me go into this review saying that I'm not really a huge fan of beef jerky. So I think if you are, you'd probably love these. The thing that I do love about them is the ingredients. And the only ingredients in these are uncured bacon, and that's it.
Wow.
It says pork, water, sea salt, vinegar, celery powder in parentheses, but the main ingredient is uncured bacon. So it's basically the same ingredients that you would find on a pack of bacon, which it's hard to find a lot of processed foods or foods in packages that really is just one ingredient. So I did like that. When I tried them on something else, like I have these little cauliflower crackers and I put butter on it and then I put a few pieces of the bacon bits on it, I did like them like that, or like throwing them in a salad. They tasted good. But as far as eating them right out of the bag, they weren't really my favorite.
Well, I can't remember the last time I was like, man, I need a handful of bacon bits.
Oh, I totally would
maybe,
do that.
Really? So
Yeah.
maybe it is a better thing just to put on the thing. But you felt like it was good, but not your favorite thing that you've ever had in your life.
Yeah, they were okay. I would probably order them again just because my husband really liked them. But it is interesting that you noted that you could add it to salads. It says you could add to salads, sweet potatoes, eggs, trail mix, and ice cream. I wouldn't think to put these on ice cream.
Not the first thing I would add them to, but maybe I'm going to need to try that now.
Yeah, so make some keto ice cream and throw on some bacon bits. I haven't tried that yet. I don't think I will try that, but I do like them on my keto crackers with butter.
Okay, good. All right, so that was by who? Who made those?
So these are by Epic.
Okay, we'll put the link on the show notes where you can find those too. Okay,
Yes.
so that's it. So check out in the show notes, go to chatthefat.com/6, and then /episode 6. And then next week, what are we going to talk about?
Next week, we are going to talk about keto isn't always the answer.
Okay, good. So we're going to dig into some other health things that can, maybe other things need to fix. Keto is not magical for all things kind of a stuff.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Whether you're brand new to keto or just looking to move past roadblocks, join us for our next Troubleshooting Keto Master Workshop. Go to chatthefat.com/workshop to find upcoming dates and register for this totally free event. You just might find your missing piece of the puzzle. Until then, we'll see you next week on Chat the Fat.